and doing the work without nurture, probably sooner or later that person will leave. The discussions we had previous hour, why the second generation don't teach Sunday school. I hear these a lot, and you had answer. And there is a tendency that the first generation see the second generation English-speaking people as they see it, they would like to get a job for them first, teaching, not as part of the congregation, part of the community, but how do I use that person because he or she is second generation, could be a good role model and all these. But here in a small group, you may have very talented people sitting there, but if that talented people are not nurtured, they wouldn't stay there. So nurture is the very first ingredient to make sure that this small group provides nurturing experience. Do we provide spiritual diet? That's the first question to ask. Second, worship. Okay. I'm not talking about worship service formally structured for an hour on Sunday morning time. In Acts 2 it says everyone was filled with awe. The prototype of worship is calling God's name in awesomeness in Genesis. That's a prototype of worship. The people come together and share the awesomeness of God. Just amazing the stories that they have experienced. So I would say the worship itself, worship is not the ingredients in the worship service, but attitude. When Christians come together and pray together and share the joy together, that is the very foundation of the worship service. In Proverbs chapter 1, I think it's verse 17, the fear of the Lord is the foundation. The fear of the Lord is not foundation. Beginning of wisdom. Okay. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of the wisdom. And my translation from the Hebrew Bible is this: worship is the foundation of education. Quite different. I remember in my seminary time, I translated and got passed by my Hebrew teacher, because the fear of the Lord is the expression of worship. So the fear of the Lord is the worshiping experience. When you stand in front of the God, in front of God, you fear, you tremble with awesomeness. So in the Old Testament it says fear of the Lord, meaning when you worship, the worship is The beginning means the foundation. Knowledge, wisdom is the education. So where the education starts? It's the worship service. Fear of the Lord. So what I mean by worship is a fear of the Lord, or sharing the awesomeness of God. We do this in a small group, either by singing, praising songs, or prayer, or whatever. But in the church, it started as a small group by remembering Jesus, His blood, and His body shared with other people. So in the New Testament it says, do this in remembrance of me. When do you hear this? In the communion. Yeah. Do this in remembrance of me. So, remembering Jesus is the core of the worship service. Remembering of the Jesus. So you don't need to go to the sanctuary to worship. Even 2 or 3 people come together and remember what Jesus did for me is good enough as a worship. So whenever a small group meets, we meet in the remembrance of God. So the second element, second ingredient, whenever small group ministry establishes, then you check whether Jesus is remembered or not. Am I in it? So usually prayer, praise, and remember the story that we about remembering Jesus, what He has done for me. As a prayer, as a praise, or as just sharing. So in any form, whether it's informal or formal, doesn't matter. As long as Jesus is remembered, you already have a core of worship experience in there. Okay, so nurture, worship, and fellowship. Fellowship is to establish, to build a real community. Well, that brings, what is community, I guess? The Christian community in Greek called koinonia happens as we share our needs, our sins, our needs, and our burdens together. Then community forms, koinonia forms, and there we encourage each other, and listen with care, and pray each other. And then the community of caring, community of believers slowly forms. When we say community, it's easy to understand, but it's hard to experience. We say church as a believing community, but it's easy to say it, but hard to experience. So many gossips going on, and officers, leaders, followers, different cultures, languages, and all this going on. It's hard to experience the real community in the church. How do we build a real community in the church? I would strongly encourage you to start from a small group, starting from 3